Welcome to another episode of Be the Hustler. Okay, in this episode, we're going to actually talk about the fourth pillar, and the fourth pillar of building a solid foundation for your business, and that is to save. And why does saving matter? Well, you've heard it a million times. Always save for a rainy day. You will be shocked during the course of your career of owning a business how many times having money saved up will bail you out and get you through the tough times. It is vital for your long-term success. So let's talk about how you start out with little to no money. If you were like me when you started out, you had almost nothing. Maybe you had a couple $100, a few $100, $1,000, $2,000 maximum. How do you start out? How do you go from that and then all of a sudden have tons of money in 10, 15, 20, 25 years? Remember the penny a day doubling? Did you do the math from the last video? Wasn't it crazy? Take a penny, double it every single day for 30 days. And the answer, if I did my calculations correctly, is a little bit over $5 million. $5 million if you take a penny a day and double it every single day for 30 days. So what's important to understand is saving, even though you're not going to necessarily be able to double it every single time, you are going to be able to compound it. And Albert Einstein once said, at least I've read it, I've seen it, that compounded interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And it really is a sweet thing when you start seeing your money grow when you're doing virtually nothing. Maybe you're investing it into a business or into a stock or some kind of a mutual fund or something, and you're not doing anything, but it snowballs. Every single year, it grows exponentially. And as it grows exponentially, it puts you in a much closer decision to become financially independent. So let's talk about financial independence for a second. What is financial independence? My version of it, there's different exact definitions, but in a nutshell, what it is you being able to live your existing lifestyle for the rest of your life without having to work. So let's say, for example, you've got a house payment and it's $1,000 a month, okay? And you've got grocery bills and car payments, that's another $1,000 a month. And then you have miscellaneous expenses, and let's just call it $3,000 a month. A financially independent person living that lifestyle, let's say they had a $3,000 a month living expense, would be able to earn enough income without having to work that they could at least make $3,000 after taxes every single month for the rest of their life. That's financial independence. Basically, you're not dependent on money. You've set yourself up through investments, through businesses and things like that the money just kind of rolls in. Kind of similar to what you hear about people that get into like rentals when they buy residential homes. And then after 20, 25 or 30 years, they own 10, 20 or 30 of them. And they're all paid off. And every month their tenants that are renting from them just write them a rent check and they just get the money. Kind of like that. So you want to set yourself up so as you get older, you don't have to actually work hard, because who wants to work until they're 90 years old, right? At some point, you got to start enjoying life and traveling and doing the things you want to do, spending time with your grandkids, all the fun stuff in life, the sweetest things in life. And you don't want to be having to go to work when you're 65 years old, 70, 75, 80 years old. Who wants to work in those years? So it's important as early as you can. If I've got people that are super young, let's say you're a teenager right now and you're watching this video, you have a huge edge on the rest of the world because you have time. You have more time for that snowball to exponentially grow longer. So basically, let's say you're 20 years old. Well, from 20 years old to 60 years old, that's 40 years. That's 40 years you could have of compounding interest from your savings, right? Let's say you're 30 years old and you want to say, I want to stop working when I'm 60. Now you've got 30 solid years of compounded interest rolling in. It's important to understand that. So it's funny because this was I had a huge epiphany when I was probably in my early 20s with a car that one of my dream cars at the time was the Dodge Viper. It had just released. I've always wanted a Lamborghini. That's the ultimate dream car. And you'll hear me say that over and over and over. I just can't justify buying a new one and losing all that money in depreciation and all that stuff. And I've seen videos of people that say, hey, you can buy used ones and own them for free and whatnot. But anyway, that's a whole nother video. So going back to this Dodge Viper, when it came out, it was like $80,000. And I said, oh my gosh, I would just kill to have that car. What do I got to do to make enough money to get that car? And so I start saving up and I start investing. And as my money's growing, I get to the point where I can almost afford the car. I can pretty much afford the car. Well, at $80,000 on a brand new Viper, after you pay your sales tax and you tag it and you pay your insurance, we'll just call it $100,000. Well, my goal at the time was, hey, I'm going to put down half and then I'll finance the other half. So let's say I had $50,000 in this example to put down on this car. And then I'm going to borrow $50,000 that I'm going to pay over, say, the next 4 years. So option A, I can fulfill my dream and I can get this car and drive it around. And I'm sure it'd be incredible to have it at that age. But then after about 4 years, that car's that I spent about $100,000, at least $100,000 for, we'll call it $100,000 for the simplicity, is probably worth 50 after depreciation if I wanted to resell it, because it's a sports car. It's going to depreciate fast. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's worth 60. We'll call it 50. So 100,000 goes down to 50,000. Okay. Now, let's say that instead of doing that, I was smart and I said, I want to invest into my future so that I can become financially independent much earlier than I would have if I was just being a spendthrift. You've got to understand in life, you cannot keep spending all your money. And even worse, stop spending more money than you make. You'll go broke. Eventually, you'll have a bad run. You'll lose your job. A business will struggle and you won't be able to keep up. You got to live way below your means. That's the goal. Easier said than done. I've been guilty of doing the other and I've learned the hard way. You've got to live underneath what your income is and what your means are. This is an absolute must. So getting back to the Viper. Option one, I buy it. I put down $50,000 cash. $50,000 goes into financing it over the next 4 years. And we're going to say, just to make it easy, that I spent $100,000 in 4 years. My investment is now worth $50,000. I truly don't believe cars are an investment. They're a depreciable asset. They're nowhere near an investment. It's just a toy, right? And you got to pay for fun. So some people argue, well, I got to pay for fun. But you shouldn't be the person that's basically spending the meat of your money, the majority amount of money in your bank to get something, whatever it is. You should never do that. My father always joked and said, you should always buy a sports car or something like that when it's like buying a gallon of milk at the grocery store. You don't even feel it. Nobody feels a gallon of milk for the most part. You just go there, it's a couple bucks, you buy it, you ring it up, you don't feel it. So if you can buy a toy, a car, a sports car, or whatever, a piece of jewelry, whatever you want, and it doesn't affect you in that shape or form, then you know that you can afford it. Not when you're struggling. Oh my gosh, I have to keep this job for 4 years so I can make the payments on my Viper. Okay, so again, going back to option one, we've lost $50,000 in 4 years. Option two, I decide that I know that I'm going to be able to have $100,000. I have $50,000 cash now, and I'm going to be able to invest $50,000 over the next 4 years, and I invest that money. I invest it, and we'll just say that I'm able to earn somewhat of an aggressive average of 10% return on my money year after year after year. We're just going to assume 10%. Some cases you can do way better than that. In some cases you might average 5, 6, or 7%. We'll just call it 10%. In 4 years, if you do the math, your $100,000 probably turns into $140,000 to $150,000, somewhere in that range. And again, I'm assuming that you're putting in $100,000 and it's compounding from the beginning, okay? Now, people say, well, if you're only putting in 50 and you're investing 50 over the next 4 years, that number's going to be different. Let's just assume I had 100, okay, total. If it compounds for 4 years, I probably got close to $150,000. Now, here's where it gets sweeter. Now, let's just stop there actually for 1 second. If you think about it for 1 second, I now have $150,000. So now 4 years later, I can actually take the extra 50, put the down payment on the Viper, and basically get a Viper for half off. I didn't really do much, right? My money just made money, and it gave me a Viper. I got to wait 4 years for it. You got to be a little patient, but then you get it for half off. Now, wait a second. What if we wait another 4 years? What if it turns into 8 years? Well, I can tell you this. In 8 years, that $100,000 earning 10% interest a year is going to balloon to over $200,000. It's going to be over $200,000. So if you can actually wait for 8 years, you can basically buy a Viper for free. That's what investing is all about. And when you start doing the math, you can get on Google, you can start punching in numbers where you put an amount of money, you put an interest rate, and then you put a length of time. And you can see how much money you're going to grow year after year after year after year. One of the best pieces of advice I can give you if you have children is to get your children to invest as much as they can, as early as they can, even into a mutual fund or something like that, okay? So even if they can only put $200 a month or $300 a month, if they can invest that, not touch it, earn interest on it, by the time they're 50 years old, they can, under most people's standards, be financially independent. They can never have to work again, and possibly by the time they're 40. So that's how important it is to get in and start dealing with this early and not putting it off. So when I talk about saving, we're talking about your business. Let's go back to you're starting a business, and this being one of the fundamentals. So if you can save a portion of what you're making into your business, rather than as your business is making money, say, oh, I can afford the nicer car, the nicer house, the nicer whatever, the saving is going to allow you to survive. It's an actual requirement. You have got to have a savings. And I don't just mean stick your money in a CD or stick it in a bank and earn a whopping 0.25% or 0.5% interest. I'm not talking about doing that. You've got to start getting with your financial advisor and people that are in that space and having them coach you, people that you trust. Find a fiduciary that has to work in your interest as an investor, that has to make the right decisions in their best power from their best educational guesses to take your money and put it to work. That's what you want to do, and you want to do it as early as possible and invest as much as possible. And then when you get to a point where you hit this point where you have so much, now you can start living a better life. You can say, okay, now I have this much and I don't really need that much. So I'm going to start living, we're going to buy a new house now. It's been 12 years. It's been 15 years. And what's beautiful about that is in the meantime, you might have paid off your existing house. You might have done that, right? You might have had a 15-year loan. And now the house is paid off. Now you've got money growing. Now you've got a business that's established. You've got all this happening. But just like what I'm going through right now, and just like what I went through 7 years ago in my We Buy Gold business, and what I went through years back, you have to have, it's like a bridge, like the Band-Aid to kind of just get you, the bridge that gets you through from the good times to the bad times, the bad times, the good times. You've got to have that saved up. And if you don't, you're very susceptible to not only going out of business, but losing everything. And in business, a lot of times you end up personally guaranteeing stuff. So, whoever you've personally guaranteed, whatever to, they can come after your personal assets and things like that. You don't want that. So save, save, save. It is going to be a crucial piece for you lasting long-term. It's important, and learn how to invest. All right, guys, until the next video, thanks for watching, and be the hustler.